Lord, help me to live this day quietly, easily, to lean upon your great strength, trustfully, restfully, to wait for the unfolding of your will, patiently, serenely, to meet others peacefully, joyously, to face tomorrow confidently, courageously. The reading, Canticle of Creation by Francis of Assisi, translated by Pascal Robinson. Most high, most powerful, good Lord, praise, glory, honor, and blessing are yours. To you alone do they belong, Most High, and there is none fit to mention you. Praise be to you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially to my reverent brother sun, who lights up the day and gives us your brightness. Beautiful is he and radiant with splendor great, singing of your significance. Praise be, my Lord, for sister moon and for the stars. In heaven you have formed them clear and precious and fair. Praise be, my Lord, for brother wind, and for the air and clouds of every kind of weather, by which you give your creatures nourishment. Praise be, my Lord, for sister water, helpful and humble, and precious and pure. Praise be, my Lord, for brother fire, by which you light up the dark. Fair is he, and joyful, and mighty, and strong. Praise be, my Lord, for our sister, Mother Earth, which sustains and keeps us, and brings forth diverse fruits with grass and flowers bright. Praise be, my Lord, for those who forgive others for your sake, and bear witness and tribulation. Blessed are those who shall in peace endure, for you, Most High, will crown them. Praise be, my Lord, for our sister death, for which no living thing can flee. Woe to them who die apart from you, and blessed are those who find themselves in your most holy will. Praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks, and be subject to him with great humility. Francis of Assisi. His charism and appeal still draws thousands of people from all walks of life, many Christian denominations, and other religions 8 centuries after his time on earth. What is the lure of this humble man? What was it that drew so many men and women to follow a very controversial and countercultural way of life? Francis, often called Saint of the Bird Bath because of his love of birds, animals, and all creatures, was so much more than the light-hearted person Hollywood has made him out to be. Francesco Bernadone was born in 1181 during the Second Crusade and died during the Fifth Crusade. It was a time of such extreme violence that, according to R.I. Moore, historian, deliberate and socially sanctioned violence began to be directed through established governmental, juridical, and social institutions against groups of people that were scapegoated to such a degree that just belonging to the group justified acts of violence. The violence reached its peak in the conflict between the Pope Alexander III and the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. Prisoners of war, women, children, and animals could expect no mercy from conquering armies. The Crusades, fighting between the merchant class and nobility, and the constant wars between Perugia and Assisi, with its corresponding cruelty, had a corrosive effect on good people. Francis was the son of a cloth merchant. He was earthy, worldly, self-centered, and a partier in his youth. He often traveled on business trips with his father, where he was learning the business of commerce. It was on these trips that he began to see the great disparity between his way of life and the workers in factories and the poor huddled on the streets. However, he continued living his lavish lifestyle, spending money on colorful clothing and parties. His conversion began when he was wounded in a battle between Assisi and Perugia, where he was taken prisoner. His father paid for his release. During his convalescence, he began to contemplate the life of Jesus. But when he recovered, he again chose to enter the army and go to war in 1205. On his way to meet Walter of Brienne, the army stopped in Spoleto. That night, Francis dreamed that he was asked the question, which Lord was more fitting for service? The Lord, meaning God, or the servant, meaning Walter of Brienne? Francis chose God and returned home the next morning, much to his father's dismay and great displeasure. Francis was a changed man. He moved from a lavish lifestyle to poverty, from the frivolity of senseless parties to a deeper sense of life, and from violence to nonviolence. These changes did not happen overnight, but continued throughout his life. At first, Francis withdrew from the world and spent a great deal of time in contemplation, reviewing his life and giving himself over to following the message of Jesus in the Gospels. Once, in a ruined church near San Damiano, Francis knelt at the foot of the cross, and there he heard a voice ask him, "Repair my church. It is in ruins." As Francis continued to live his new life, a number of men and women began to follow him. A prominent noblewoman, Claire, after hearing Francis speak, asked to be admitted into the community. Francis accepted her, and one night Claire and her sister slipped away from their palace and were admitted into the community. Francis took them to a Benedictine convent to stay until he had proper lodgings for them. Claire and Francis became co-founders of this Franciscan way of life, following the gospel, nonviolence, joy, and poverty. Life was not easy for either of these people. Suffering was a constant, as they fought to have their rules for men and women accepted. Why then did so many men and women from all classes follow them? And what lessons can we derive from Francis' life? Let's first look at violence, since this was a visible thread that was woven through Francis' life. Our time is filled with violence. The 20th century held 2 world wars, the second ending with the horrific nuclear bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And that was not enough to stop the killings, as the Korean, Vietnamese, and Afghanistan wars ensued. There were dictators who relished violence in Chile, Guatemala, Argentina, South Sudan, and other parts of Africa. As the 21st century began, racism, populism, neo-fascism, misogyny, sex trafficking, slavery in many forms kept rising to the surface. It seems there's no end in sight. Enter Francis. How did he live in a world of sanctioned violence? How did he cope with all that he endured in war and prison? Francis was a simple man who became focused on living the gospel. He was not a great thinker, and in fact his own brothers felt that he was too incompetent to be leader of the community. They elected a new leader, and Francis, accepting, withdrew from the world for a short time, delving deeply into a contemplative life. In doing so, he spent many hours walking through forests and fields. His eyes were opened to the depth of matter, where he became one in heart with the wind, the moon, the stars, and all the chaotic movements of life, where God is dynamically creating more life. Francis recognized that in this oneness there was a movement from his partial, isolated self to his whole life as whole within the whole cosmos. This is something we can look at. He continued to stay in this withdrawal from the activity of the world, but also felt a continuous tug to enter the fray and do something. The rest of his life was spent preaching and working with his brothers, as well as taking long periods of time in contemplative silence. This movement between contemplation and action formed his courageous stance against violence. In search of making peace between Christians and Muslims, he traveled to Damietta in Egypt to meet with al-Malik al-Kamil, Sultan of Syria and Egypt. There is no written report of the conversation between the two men, but they left each other in peace. Francis, unfortunately, contracted the trachoma virus that eventually left him blind and incapacitated. Francis underwent a cultural conversion through this visit. When he wrote his rule for the community, he went against the religious protocol of his day, that Muslims were best served with violence and war. Francis insisted that they must be treated with love and nonviolence. He had a great affinity for all the animals, birds, and reptiles. According to his biographer, he often preached to them and to flowers, blessing them and bestowing peace on them. When viewed in this light, we can see why Francis became the birdbath saint. But we need another lens with which to see his actions in a different light. We might know the story of the Wolf of Gubio. The villagers of Gubio were frightened because a large wolf was attacking their livestock and intimidating the people. The story says that Francis met the wolf and made the sign of the cross over him, stopping him from attacking. He then spoke with the wolf and made a pact with him. He promised that in return for the wolf leaving the people and his livestock alone, the villagers would provide food and drink for his lifetime. The wolf promised, and peace settled in the village. This is a well-loved story, and although it might not have happened, it is, nonetheless, true. Our perceived enemies are fierce wolves. The more we violently fight them, the larger they become. Francis' way is the opposite. In obliging people to care for the needs of the wolf no longer needed to attack the livestock or the people. This is socially significant. There can be no peace without justice. And in most cases, justice means providing the basic necessities so that people might live. In the story, the pact is not unconditional surrender, but rather a win-win solution with advantages for both parties. It shows the moderation and prudence in Francis' remarkable arbitration in an age when armed clashes and political struggles predominated. Most clashes ended with the defeated banished or imprisoned, their possessions confiscated. There was never, or rarely, the difficult work of true reconciliation, a conciliatory truce between socially diverse groups. Francis possessed great wisdom that is passed on to us today, and he achieved this wisdom through contemplation, through his action, joy and poverty, surrendering all to Christ, thus being caught in the love of Christ. Celano, his biography, wrote this of Francis: "Talk of Jesus was always on his lips. He was always with Jesus. Jesus in his heart, in his mouth, in his ears, in his eyes. Jesus in his hands. He bore Jesus always in his whole body." Today, we are all so very tired. The constant stream of news of violence, the widening gap between rich and poor, the looming threat of the impacts of climate change. I know, personally, I don't want to watch or read the news. When I read the CBC Morning Brief, I immediately look at the section that says, "Now for some good news to start your morning." We want what is good, true, and peaceful. We search for a quiet place to become who we really are, and Francis offers a spiritual path to this place. He admonished his community, and he reiterates the message today. Follow the life of Jesus in the gospel. Be love. To do this, we must carve out space each day and enter into the heart of the Holy One. Eliadelio compares Francis' contemplative nature to Teilhard de Chardin. She writes, "Now here is the amazing insight that both Francis of Assisi and Teilhard realized. The power at the heart of a leaf is the same power at the heart of my life. It is the power of God." Francis did not pray. He became prayer. Francis saw God in literally everyone and every creation. Although he did not know about quantum physics, waves, and particles, he intuitively moved with the chaotic evolution of his time, in love with love. He saw the deeply personal presence of God in the matter of the universe. The power of contemplation is this awakening to the presence of God everywhere. As we contemplate a leaf, a rabbit, a child, the sky, we begin to see that one thing as the whole. Like Julian of Norwich saw the universe in a hazelnut, so we see the cosmos in each particle of creation. Francis of Assisi is the patron saint of ecology for this reason. He has taught that in prayer and contemplation, we awaken to our own reality and to the deep presence of God within, without us, and beyond. When Francis died, he said, "I have done what is mine to do. May Christ teach you what is yours." May we all awaken to our task in a beautiful and, yes, violent world. May we see, as Meister Eckhart wrote, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me." May we become living prayer. May we become love in the world. Amen. The alternative version to the prayer attributed to Jesus, as rendered by Mark Hathaway. O silent sound, whose shimmering music pulsates at the heart of each and all, clear a space in us where your melody may be perceived in its purity. Let the rhythm of your counsel reverberate through our lives, so that we may move to the beat of justice, love, and peace. Then our whole being at one with your song, grant that the earth may be filled with the beauty of your voice. Endow us with the wisdom to produce and share what each being needs to grow and flourish, and give us courage to embrace our shadow with emptiness, as we embrace others in their darkness. But let us not be captive to uncertainty, nor cling to fruitless pursuits. For from you springs forth the rhythm, the melody, and the harmony, which restores all to balance, again and again. Amen. The Blessing. Francis never wrote the famous peace prayer, which only came to light in the last half of the 19th century. However, in his 27th amendment, Francis did write a peace prayer. Where there is charity and wisdom, there is neither fear nor ignorance. Where there is patience and humility, there is neither anger nor disturbance. Where there is poverty with joy, there is neither greed or avarice. Where there is rest and meditation, there is neither anxiety nor restlessness. Where there is the fear of the Lord to guard the entrance, there the enemy cannot have a place to enter. Where there is a heart full of mercy and discernment, there is neither excess nor hardness of heart. Amen.